There's a version of a day that plays out in millions of American homes tonight, and it looks like this. You wake up already tired, you go to work, you come home drained, you feed yourself something quick, you stare at a screen until it's late enough to sleep, and then you get up and do the whole thing again. Nothing is exactly wrong, and nothing feels exactly alive. It's just the loop running quietly, day after day after day. If that sounds familiar, you are not broken, and you are not alone. Something has changed in this country about the way people actually live, and almost nobody is naming it directly. The small things that used to make a life feel like a life, the hobby, the dinner with friends, the weekend you looked forward to all week, have gone missing for an enormous number of people. Not because they stopped caring about them, because there is nothing left at the end of the day to give them. We tend to explain this away one person at a time. He's just lazy, she's just depressed, they're all just addicted to their phones. But when the same thing is happening to this many people all at once, those explanations stop holding. The real story isn't that Americans lost interest in their own lives, it's that life quietly stopped giving them anything back for showing up. And by the end of this, you'll understand exactly how a whole country slipped from living into merely existing, and why so many people feel it in their bones but can't quite find the words for it. Because there's a line between living and existing, and most people don't notice the exact moment they cross it. They just wake up one day, already on the other side. Let's clear up the explanation most people reach for first, because it's the one doing the most harm. When someone stops going out, stops picking up the hobby, stops making plans, we're quick to label it laziness, a lack of discipline, a generation that's soft or entitled or glued to screens. And that label sticks because it's comfortable, it keeps the problem small and personal, something wrong with them. But look at the sheer scale of it, and that story falls apart. This isn't a few people who lost their drive. It's a mood that has settled over tens of millions across every age and background, and you cannot explain a nationwide condition with millions of separate personal failings. When everyone is tired in the same specific way, the tiredness isn't coming from inside each of them. It's coming from something they're all standing in. That's not people who stopped trying. It's people who ran out of whatever trying was supposed to give back. Here's why that matters. Because if the cause were personal, the fix would be personal. Just try harder, just cheer up. But if the cause is shared, then no amount of individual effort solves it. And millions of people are blaming themselves for something that was never theirs to fix alone. So let's look at what they're actually standing in. Start with the engine underneath all of it, the one people describe over and over without always naming it. The feeling of working harder every single year and somehow getting less in return. That sensation is not in anyone's imagination. For a long stretch now, the cost of living has climbed steadily while what people earn has crawled, so that running as fast as you can just barely keeps you in the same place. And here's the quiet cruelty of that arrangement. When all your effort goes into staying still, there's nothing left over. No surplus of money, no surplus of time, no surplus of energy. And that surplus, that little bit left over at the end of the day and the end of the month, is the exact thing that living is made of. Existing is covering the basics. Living is what you do with what's left. When the leftover disappears, so does the living, without anyone announcing it. And once you start looking, the signs of it are everywhere, hiding in plain sight as statistics we file under other headings. People are going out less, joining less, belonging to less. Membership in the clubs and leagues and community groups that once filled ordinary evenings has been draining away for years. Fewer people are dating, fewer are forming the relationships that used to anchor a life. Not because they stopped wanting them, but because connection takes energy and time that survival already spent. Hobbies that once had whole communities around them shed their members. Even holidays, the days specifically set aside for joy, land flatter every year, met with a shrug instead of anticipation. Each of these gets explained on its own, blamed on technology or on a generation or on the times. But line them all up and a single pattern jumps out. Across 100 different corners of life, people are withdrawing from the parts that made living feel like living, all at once, all in the same direction. That's not a coincidence of 100 separate trends. It's one thing showing up in 100 places. If you felt this yourself, that low, grinding tiredness that a weekend never quite fixes, drop a word in the comments and tell me you see it too. I read every one, and I think it helps people to know how many others are feeling the exact same thing. So let's talk about what actually got taken. Because it happened so gradually, most people never saw it go. Nobody sends a letter announcing that your life has been downgraded from living to existing. It erodes, one small subtraction at a time. First, it's the little joys that go, because they feel optional. You stop cooking the real meal and just heat something up, because you're too wiped to stand at a stove. You stop calling the friend because the call feels like one more task. You let the hobby gather dust, because by the time you have a free hour, you have no energy to fill it. None of these feel like a crisis on their own. Each one is just a small, reasonable surrender to exhaustion. But they add up, and one day you look around and realize the texture of your life has been sanded down to just the parts you're required to do. Work, chores, sleep, repeat, with all the parts that made it yours worn away. That's the slow slide, not a dramatic collapse, a gradual thinning, until what's left is just enough to keep functioning and not one bit more. And it isn't only money that ran out. Time did too, and in some ways, that's the deeper theft. The line that used to separate work from the rest of life has dissolved, so the job follows people home in their pockets. A message here, an email there, a low expectation of always being reachable that never fully switches off. Many are working more hours than the official week, or a second job stacked on the first, just to hold the same ground their parents held on one income. And underneath the visible hours runs the invisible one, the mental load, the constant background hum of tracking the bills, the appointments, the school forms, the 1,000 small logistics of keeping a household from tipping over. A person can be off the clock and still not be at rest, because the mind never clocks out. So even the free time that does exist arrives already spent, cluttered, unable to become the open, easy space that living actually requires. You can have an evening to yourself and still have no room inside it. And here's what just existing actually looks like from the inside, because it's more than a busy schedule. It's a specific kind of flatness. It's the weekend you spend recovering from the week instead of enjoying it, so that rest never turns into anything more than not working. It's the strange, heavy fact that even the free things, a walk, a phone call, sitting outside, start to feel like too much, because exhaustion doesn't care whether something costs money. It's the quiet disappearance of anticipation, the way you stop having things to look forward to until the calendar is just a series of obligations to get through. There was a comment I saw that captured it perfectly, someone saying they didn't even care about celebrating the holiday this year, that they'd rather just stay home and clean. Sit with that for a second, because it's not laziness and it's not sadness exactly. It's depletion. When even a day off, a day meant for joy, lands as just another day to be gotten through or filled with chores, that's the sound of a person running on empty. That's not a bad mood. That's what existing instead of living actually feels like, hour by hour. It helps to name what living even means, because we've drifted so far that the word has gone abstract. Living isn't luxury. It was never about wealth. It's the margin around survival where a person actually becomes themselves. It's the unhurried dinner that turns into a 2-hour conversation. It's picking up an instrument for no reason but the pleasure of it. It's the spontaneous yes, the trip taken on a whim, the afternoon with nothing planned. It's rest that actually restores instead of rest that just barely recharges you for Monday. It's the sense that your days belong to you and not only to the list of things you owe. Every one of those things runs on the same raw materials: a little spare time, a little spare money, a little spare energy. Strip those away and none of it is technically gone. You're told you could still do all of it, but the fuel it runs on is empty. That's the trick of existing. It doesn't forbid the good life, it just removes everything the good life was made of and leaves the menu sitting on the table. And maybe the most unsettling part is how normal all of this has come to feel. We've redefined a good life downward until just getting through the week without a disaster counts as doing well, until tired is simply the baseline everyone assumes, until a person who admits they feel empty is met with a shrug and a quiet "me too." When exhaustion becomes the water everyone swims in, it stops looking like a problem and starts looking like the weather, something you endure rather than something anyone thinks to question. That normalization is its own kind of loss. It's the moment a whole country stops even expecting to live and agrees to just exist together without ever once deciding to. If any of this is putting words to something you've been carrying, A-like helps more people find it. Takes 1 second, and honestly, on something this easy to feel alone in, it matters more than you'd think. Now let's talk about what really created this, because it is not a personal failing and it's important to say that plainly. It's tempting to look at a whole country running on empty and assume everyone simply chose comfort over effort or lost their nerve. But when you see the same exhaustion in the young worker and the middle-aged parent and the person near retirement, the cause isn't in their characters, it's in the system they all share. We built an economy that measures itself by output, by productivity, by growth, and stopped measuring whether the people inside it were actually able to live. Over decades, the things that used to make life feel livable got hollowed out one by one. Stable work with room to breathe gave way to more hours for less security. The community life that once filled people's evenings thinned out. The financial cushion that let a family relax on a weekend eroded into a constant low-grade math about bills. None of that was an accident of nature. It was the predictable result of a set of choices about what we valued, and we chose the output over the people making it. So the exhaustion isn't a moral failure spreading person to person. It's the designed result of a machine that asks for everything and leaves nothing for the living part. That's not people who broke. It's people the system wore down exactly as it was built to. And there's one more thing making this harder to see and harder to carry, which is that almost everyone hides it. Scroll through anyone's feed and you'll see the highlights, the vacation, the smiling dinner, the win, curated proof that they, at least, are really living. So the tired person alone on the couch concludes that they must be the only one running on empty, that everyone else cracked a code they somehow missed. That belief is a trap, and a lonely one. It turns a shared, systemic exhaustion into a private, personal shame. And shame keeps people silent, and silence keeps them isolated. Each one convinced their emptiness is a character flaw, rather than a condition nearly everyone around them is also carrying behind their own highlight reel. The performance of living has replaced the thing itself, and it leaves millions of people feeling completely alone inside an experience that is, in fact, almost universal. If everyone said it out loud at once, the spell would break. Most people never do. Let's make this concrete, because a condition this big only means something when it lands on one life. Picture a man in his early 40s, a decent job, a family he loves, a home that from the outside looks like the whole thing worked out. And most nights, after the kids are down and the dishes are done and the last email is answered, he sits on the edge of the couch in the quiet and feels, more than anything, empty. Not sad exactly, just done. He can't remember the last time he was excited about something. The hobbies he had at 25 are boxes in the garage. His friendships have shrunk to occasional texts. He tells himself he has no right to feel this way because on paper he has everything, and that guilt makes it worse because now he's tired and ashamed of being tired. He's not living a bad life, he's barely living a life at all, and he can feel the difference, which is its own particular ache. He gets up the next morning and does it again, because that's what you do. For a staggering number of Americans, that hollow emptiness at the end of a day that looked fine on paper is just a Tuesday. And it isn't only the middle-aged and the settled who feel it. Picture someone much younger, 26, a few years into working life, who was handed the old equation: work hard and it pays off, build a life, get ahead. She did the work. And what she found on the other side wasn't a ladder, it was a treadmill. The paycheck covers the rent and the basics and almost nothing else. The future she was told to save toward, the home, the family, the security, keeps drifting further out of reach no matter how fast she runs at it. So she's already tired in a way she assumed was reserved for people twice her age. Already suspecting that the deal she was sold doesn't really exist, already learning to shrink her expectations of life down to whatever survival will allow. That's what makes this moment different from ordinary hard times. It's reaching people before they ever got the chance to live, teaching them to exist first so they never even learn what they're missing. A whole generation is being handed the tired instead of the living and told that it's normal. Now here's the part that turns exhaustion into something more dangerous, and it's the piece most people miss. When everyone is this depleted, this consumed by simply keeping their own head above water, something happens on a larger scale. People stop having the energy to look up. There was a comment that named this exactly, someone pointing out that people are so busy surviving, working, feeding their families, paying their bills, that they don't even notice the bigger changes happening around them until those changes land directly on their own lives, and by then it's too late. That's not an accident. Exhaustion is its own kind of control. A population too tired to do anything but recover is a population that isn't paying attention, isn't pushing back, isn't asking why the deal keeps getting worse. The grind doesn't just take your evenings, it quietly takes your capacity to notice that it's taking them. And that is the deepest cost of a country stuck in survival mode. Not just the joy that goes missing, but the awareness, the energy it would take to demand something better. And the cost of all this doesn't stay contained to mood. A body held in survival mode for years pays for it. Chronic stress isn't only a feeling, it wears on sleep, on health, on the nervous system, so that people end up not just emotionally depleted, but physically worn, tired in a way rest no longer fixes, because the pressure never lets up long enough for anything to heal. And what's true for a single body becomes true for a whole society. A population this depleted has less of everything left over, less patience, less attention, less of the spare capacity it takes to care for a neighbor, join a cause, or even notice a system tilting further against them. Exhaustion on a national scale doesn't just make people sad, it makes them easy to manage. It hollows out the very energy a country would need to imagine something better and go get it, which may be the most convenient consequence of all, for everyone except the tired. So let's go back to that loop we started with. The wake up tired, work, come home drained, stare at a screen, do it again. Now you know what you're really looking at. It isn't a personal flaw, and it isn't a nation that got lazy. It's an enormous number of people who did everything they were told, who kept showing up, and who quietly found that showing up stopped being enough to buy an actual life. They didn't lose interest in living. Living quietly stopped leaving room for itself, squeezed out a little more each year by a system that took the time and the money and the energy that living is made of. These aren't people who gave up. They're people who ran out of what it takes to keep going and kept going anyway, on empty, because that's what was asked of them. And here's the honest, hopeful truth underneath all of it, because it does not have to stay this way. The line between living and existing is real, but it isn't a one-way door. This condition was built, which means it can be unbuilt. The exhaustion so many people feel is not a personal defect to be ashamed of. It's a rational response to being asked for more than any person has to give, and the first step out of it is simply naming it, refusing to swallow the story that it's your fault, and reclaiming even a little of it matters more than it sounds. The occasional real dinner, the hobby pulled back out of the garage, the evening defended from a job that wants to eat it. On their own, none of those fix the system, but they're how a person remembers. There's a difference between the two lives at all, and remembering is what keeps the hunger for something better alive. This doesn't get solved alone, and it doesn't get solved by trying harder. It gets solved by enough people naming the same thing out loud at the same time, and refusing to accept that just existing is all a life in this country was ever supposed to be. As long as we keep measuring a country only by what it produces and never by whether its people can actually live, the loop will keep grinding, and more of us will keep slipping quietly from living into existing. Whether that stays true is not a law of nature, it's a choice about what we build and what we decide people are owed. And it's one we haven't made yet. So I'll leave you with the honest question, the one worth sitting with tonight. When was the last time you felt like you were actually living and not just getting through the day? And if the answer took you a while, what would it take to get that back? Drop your answer below. I read every one.